And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Translators on Air. My name is Dmitry Korniukhov. I'm your host. Joining me today, my incredible co-host, Elena Tereshchenkova. Hi, Elena.
Hello, everyone.
And our guest today, Jenae Spry. Hi, Jenae.
Hi. Thanks for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always excited to have new guests in our show. Jenae Spry is a French, English, medical, and technical translator, and she's been working for over 11 years. And she's also a productivity and performance coach for translators, and she's been doing this for over 5 years now. She has a master's degree and certification from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey, and she's also the owner of RxTranslations Incorporated. She runs a Success by Rx.com, an online coaching program for freelancers, in addition to running a variety of webinars on that platform. And today we'll be talking about productivity and time management for translators. But before we jump to the topic of our conversations, I would like to make a few announcements, as always. The third season of Translators on Air has been sponsored by our friends at SmartCat. SmartCat developed an intuitive platform where you can find more jobs, and you can also use their free CAT tool. So if this is something you're interested in, check out SmartCat by clicking on the green button below this video, or if you're watching this in the recording, you can click the first link in the description. All right, we have quite a few people tuning in. Hello, Ray, Andrew, Ronnie, Susanna, Christian, Teresa, Luis, Dimitro, Elizabeth, Juliana, Alexandra, and Sona. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. It's always fun to have you on our show. For those of you who has never seen any episodes of our show, this is a live webinar where you can be participants. You can use the chat window on the right-hand side to say hi and hello. And if you have a specific question and you want us to answer your question and discuss it, you can use the question suggestion box below this video. There is an orange button that says ask a question or suggest a topic, and you can post your question there. It would be awesome if you could also share this webinar on social media, like right now, because we still have a few spots left. So these webinars are best enjoyed with friends and colleagues. So if you have a few seconds, just share the link on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, or any other social network that you use. And don't forget to use our hashtag Translators on Air. All right, Jenae, over to you. How are you?
Good, good. How are you guys doing? Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being our guest. It's always a pleasure to connect with a colleague translator and to learn something useful about time management. So it's a great topic.
Awesome.
Yeah, I already quickly introduced you, but it'd be awesome if you could talk a little bit about yourself. How did you get into translation, and share a little bit about your journey in this awesome profession?
Sure, no problem. I'd love to. So I ended up getting into translation because I was taking language classes in Europe and France, and they kind of just teach languages through translation. And I loved it. And then I found out shortly after that people would actually pay you to do that in real life. And I was like, well, sold. So I came back to the United States and I found an awesome program at the Monterey Institute. It's now the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey. Went through that program. Great program. I learned so much. Great professors there. And that's about it. And then I started as a full-time in-house translator / project manager. And then I really wanted to go freelance. So I quit that job to go full-time and do full-time freelancing. So yeah, so that's basically it in terms of becoming a translator. And I've just been working at it ever since.
What was your main motivation for going freelance?
Yeah, so I think I'm not really meant to be like a full-time employee.
I'm freelancing that, I guess, at some point.
Yeah, so I was a freelancer even in school. So I started freelancing in like 2006, so before I even graduated. And then, you know, I thought, well, I'll work full-time while I'm building up my freelance business. And then the full-time work kind of took over my whole entire life. I was working super, super long hours. And I was like, I'm not going to let this affect, you know, the direction of my freelance business. So I just kind of took the plunge, even though I wasn't really ready. But, you know, these days looking back, I'm like, there was never going to be a good time anyway, you know?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like people always are waiting, and it's like there's never that perfect moment of like, oh, I've got so much saved up and like I'm so ready. Like that's just not a real thing.
And it's not only with freelancing, it's basically with everything. So if you're waiting for something and waiting for a perfect one to do something and waiting for a perfect moment, it's just never going to happen.
You just gotta go, you know. Sink or swim. So yeah, that's how I went freelance.
And how did you decide to specialize in medical translation?
So it was kind of by accident. I originally did technical, so like computer localization, things like that. And then I didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought that I would. And so I moved into legal translation, which I still do some legal now, but mostly as it relates to medical. And then I got hired to do some medical translations, which were still, you know, technical in nature. So it was still kind of in the realm, and did a bunch of research, and I really enjoyed it. Way back in, you know, younger days, I wanted to be a doctor. Turns out you have to do math to be a doctor, and that wasn't going to work for me. So it kind of worked out because it's like this thing that, you know, that I wanted like way back when kind of came around, you know, came full circle, if you will, to translation. So now I get to, you know, read people's medical records, and I work a lot in investigational medicine and stuff as well. So I kind of get the best of both worlds. I don't have to actually do the, you know, stuff.
Yeah. So. Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
And how did you get into coaching and helping translators to get more organized?
So that's actually kind of a funny story. So that happened, you know, like around 5 years ago. And my colleagues from school found out how much I was making versus how much they were making. And it was quite a disparity. And so they wanted some help to figure out, you know, what's the difference? Like we both graduated from the program, you know, all things being equal, basically. And so we sat down and I was helping them, and I was loving it. You know, I really enjoyed helping them out. And of course, I didn't charge them anything, because I didn't want to like charge colleagues or anything like that. I just was trying to help out some friends, you know. And then I remember, you know, they were asking me more and more help. So I started turning down translation work in order to help them. And I finally realized, like, this is not going to go well, right? If I'm like taking days off of work to help, I'm not getting paid by them, like, this is not a good plan at all. So I finally like told them, I was like, hey, you know, I don't want to do this, but I can't turn down paid work to help you. And they were like, oh my God, we've been trying to pay you for like all this time. You keep saying no, like, of course. Like, so, you know, as they started paying me, I was like, this is like the best job ever. Like, I'm, you know, helping people like be productive and be successful, and they're making more money. I had one girl triple her income. And so it just like felt so good. And then I was finally able to, you know, sustain that situation. I was able to spend the time that I wanted to spend on it, because now I was being paid to do it. And I was able to turn down translation work in favor of that. And then, you know, I wanted to come up with a more affordable way to do it. So that's why I launched my online site, where it has like some self-paced material. So it's not, people aren't always paying for like every minute of my time, you know, it's just a lot cheaper that way. So it's basically how I got into it.
Yeah. So you've been doing it for the past 5 years, right? And over this time, what was the most often things that comes up that translators struggle with in terms of time management?
So it's usually, there are two main camps of people that typically struggle with time management when it comes to translation. Either it's someone who is super experienced or just overworked. Like they feel like they're working like practically 24 hours a day, and they feel like they have to do that, and they're just like trying to keep up. And then on the other flip side of that, you have like brand new translators, or just translators who are not getting a lot of work. And they struggle with time management because, you know, they're getting like 1,000 words and they have like 3 days to do it, right? Because they're just not fully booked. And so what ends up happening is they don't work for 2 days. And then on the third day around like noon, they start like, oh, you know what? I should probably like do that translation, right? But they haven't actually done any productive anything for the last, you know, whatever days. So it's usually like those two camps of people that I see a lot. So I feel like the experienced translators, are probably like the majority actually of people that struggle with time management, because they kind of wake up one day and they're in the situation of like being bombarded and they don't know how they got here, you know? And a lot of times they're not doing the type of work that they want it to do. You know, like maybe they're in the middle of medical translation now and really they love marketing translation or, you know, whatever, like they just, because they're not in control and they're just waking up in this situation. So those are like the two, you know, main camps. And experienced translators, as long as once they finally like get a grasp of time management, then they have time to actually be in control of their businesses and, you know, choose what they want to do with their day and what types of translations they want to take on. And likewise, you know, beginner translators can really boost businesses so fast, because instead of spending 2 days watching Netflix and then, you know, the third day translating, they're spending 2 days marketing themselves and, you know, working on their new website or whatever it is, and then, you know, working translation in between. So it's like kind of like a flip-flop, right? Like you're doing more marketing, sales, promotions, whatever when you're a beginner, and then like part-time translator. And then when you're experienced and overworked, you're mostly a translator, but you still have to make time to do everything else without killing yourself, you know?
Yeah. And why experienced translators are so overwhelmed with work? Is it something? I'm just thinking out loud, because this happens to me sometimes too. Sometimes, by the way, I'm in the camp of, well, not newbie translators, but translators during slow period, where I also sometimes do it when I have 1,000 words to translate, and then I spend 2 days, I don't know on what, and then I just start doing it on the third day. So why does it happen that translators you have worked with are so overwhelmed with work? Are they charging too low? Are they taking on too much work just I don't know, because there were times when they didn't have a lot of work? What is the main reason?
Yeah, great question. So I find, you know, we're all very used to this concept of feast and famine, right? Like just as translators, we all have really busy periods and then slower periods. But a lot of people don't do a great job of managing that fact. So especially for translators who in the beginning, maybe they thought they were going to have more work than they did. And so they like really, really struggled a lot and they never want to go back to that moment. Or they're just always super afraid of that next famine period. And since they're not in control, they're just chasing this business and they're trying to keep up. Instead of saying like, okay, this is realistically how much I can make in like an 8-hour day or whatever. And then at some point I will have a slower period where, you know, I won't have it that much work. So they're not doing a great job at managing the fact that at some point we will have a slower period. One of the things that I really suggest for, you know, experienced or any translator at all is that when you're in these periods of lower work, that you should keep a running list of all the things that you need to be doing, all the things that you don't have time to do, like work on your website, you know, write a blog, like whatever it is that you should be doing and you're too busy translating to do it. So that the moment that slow period hits, you're on it, right? You're still being productive and you're still working full time every day. But you're able to market yourself, get yourself out there, or maybe catch up on, you know, whatever things that you've been just lacking in. Maybe your website didn't get updated to the new WordPress version, or, you know, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's important to do that. But basically, they're just not managing these two aspects very well. And one of the things I think that really helps is that they underestimate, or, you know, I guess they underestimate how their clients are going to provide for them. And what I mean by that is they don't want to market themselves because they do have so much work during these busy periods. So they don't want to get more clients because they can barely keep up with the clients that they have. But the idea is that if you're turning down enough work during these really busy periods, you should have still full-time work during the famine periods to just sustain you. You know, maybe you're not bombarded with work, but you should still have like full-time work, you know? But you won't have it if you're not continuing to like market yourself and put yourself out there, if you get complacent. So that way you can still like maintain your income and you don't feel like, oh my God, I have to take every single job that comes my way, like handwritten doctor's notes, like it doesn't matter, I have to take it, I have to spend all night translating it. They need it by 2 a.m. Okay, no problem. Like they're just accepting like everything because they're so worried about this like time that's going to come, and it's, if you just plan ahead for your income and how that's going to work for you, then you don't feel like you have to take every single job that comes down the pipeline.
Great comment from Ronnie. He says some passive income might help, like investment dividends, etc. Yeah, that's a great idea too. And probably during slower periods, we all have time to look into that.
Yeah, I mean that's a great thing to put on that list, right? For like what I'm going to do.
Exactly.
But the fact is that just like, please, the problem is that people get super burnt out during these feast periods, that when the famine hits, they don't have energy to wake up the next day and work full time on their new website or whatever it is, or look into this stuff. They just want to sleep, right? Or just like, they just can't. They're just like, oh my God, thank God I have one day.
Take a vacation.
Take a vacation, exactly. So, I mean, if you just maintain like you're not overworking yourself, you won't be so burnt out when that period hits, and you'll be able to still be productive and function well.
Yeah.
Not that vacations are a bad thing. We should all be taking them.
So do you have any routines that help you be more productive?
Yeah. So I suggest always to batch tasks as much as possible. That works really, really well for me. And what I mean by that is try to combine tasks and things that you have to do. So you're doing them all at once and then you're done with them during the day. So one of the things that people lose a lot of time in is task switching. So what I mean by that is when you work from home, it's really easy to get this idea of like, I'm going to clean the house in between translating. I'm going to do laundry. I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to, whatever it is, pick my friend up from the airport. But when you're doing that, I mean, you're getting out of one task, which is the translation or, invoicing or whatever it might be. And you're moving your entire mentality to a different task. And it takes time to do that shift to that new task. And it takes time to do the shift back to translation. So that's just time that's being lost. Whereas if you just finished the translation and then ended your day, you would have plenty of time to clean the house and go pick up your friend from the airport or whatever. But I think when we work from home, we have this tendency to think like, oh, let me just do this really quick. I don't know how many of you guys have ever done this where really quick turns into like 3 hours or like 2 hours. You're like, let me just take care of this. So if you can just keep yourself on task and finish it and then move on, I've found that that's like boosted my productivity to a ridiculous extent. So that's one of the ways I was able to boost my numbers per hour so significantly, is stopping this whole like, let me do this really quick thing.
Don't you take any breaks during those?
Yes. I do, but I try to keep them as short as possible. So for any sort of jobs that I have a complexity rating. So I have 3 different types of complexity: low, medium, and high. So for low complexity, I will probably just push through. So those jobs would be like, for me, it would be like an informed consent form. Something just written in like pretty basic language for the general public. High complexity would be, now we're into like doctor's notes or maybe a surgical form or something like that. So that's going to be a little bit more brain intensive. It's going to be a little bit more difficult. So I'm probably going to take more frequent breaks then. But on low complexity documents, I've been able to take maybe 10-minute breaks, like maybe 2 or 3 of those, and then be completely done with my day at like noon, right? Because if I'm waking up early and I just push through and I can translate, for low complexity documents, I can reach up to 2,000 words an hour. So for those, if I'm translating, 3-4 hours, that's it. I'm done. I've translated plenty of words, and then I can just go and to the beach or whatever I want to do, because it's still the middle of the day. So I try to remember that that's an option for me, that if I finish, I can go and I can just live my life away from my computer and do my thing. And that's so motivating to me that I'm like, no, I'm not going to spend that time that I could be spending at the beach or with my friends or at a cafe taking a break around my house. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, let me just get this done. And I also find, I don't know if anybody else has this experience, but when I'm translating, you kind of like get in the zone, and you remember more easily what you just translated, right? Like a word that you just translated or a phrase that you just translated. Whereas if you take a break and you come back, like sometimes it takes a minute to be like, wait a minute, like where am I in this translation? Or, what's happening? Yeah. So it kind of like reduces a lot of that time as well. So on lower complexity documents, I'm able to just kind of push through and go really quickly. Higher complexity, I'm stopping a lot anyway. You know, it's like it's really dense material. I'm having to look up a lot. So it's like I'm already in that situation of having to stop and go anyway. So then I will take more breaks because I don't want to burn out, and I want to make sure that the translation has high quality as well.
I think it's the thing that everyone has to experiment with. I mean, the breaks and the time that you're pushing through, or the frequency of the breaks and the length of the breaks. Because I've been trying some different things, different approaches with this, and one of the most, I think everyone knows about the Pomodoro Technique. Where you work for 25 minutes, then take a break for 5 minutes, and repeat that 4 times, and then have a longer break. That doesn't work for me. 25 minutes is too little for me.
Doesn't work for me.
Yeah, and I think the best work and break periods that work for me is 45-15. Yep. Somehow it's the most productive approach that I have found during my experiments with that.
That's actually really common for most of the translators that I work with. That's pretty average, 45 and
45-15.
Yeah. The thing that I would suggest is to make sure that you're being prescriptive instead of descriptive. So in other words, that you're deciding in advance whatever time period you're going to work and whatever time period you're going to take a break. So a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to take a break when I get tired. Well, it's too late. Now it's too late because now you're tired. So
I agree 100%.
It doesn't matter if it's 30 minutes later, you're still going to be tired. You know, you're not going to like reboot in that amount of time. So the idea, and I actually change the amounts of times that I work depending on the translation. So I'll sit down and translate for 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll translate different sections of the project just to get an idea of how many words per minute I'm translating. So I can get an idea of how long the entire project is going to take of actual sitting there and doing the translation. So then I know, okay, this is a 5-hour job. If I were to just sit here and translate straight for 5 hours, that's how long this would take. You know, what's my break strategy going to be? Well, if it's really easy, I might be like, I'm just going to do the 5 hours and be done. And then I'll be over with this translation. Maybe I'll take a 5-10 minute break here. If it's, I do the 5-10 minutes and it's a 5-hour job and it's like a nightmare of a job, like just super, I didn't translate very many words at all in those 5 or 10 minutes. Now I know, you know what, I'm probably going to have to do like 30 minutes or even 20 minutes or something and take like a 5-minute break. Cause my brain's just like already, in the 5 or 10 minutes, I'm already like, oh my gosh, really? So I think it depends on the job too. And it's just important to sit down and think about your strategy before you start translating, and now you're tired and you're burnt out and now you have a deadline looming. Like that's never a good situation to be in.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. I will take note of that.
Yeah, I keep a timer running for new and
me too.
Different projects. And then I keep track of how many words per minute I'm translating all the time. So that I know, like, if it's dropping, like if it starts to drop, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to take a break because clearly we're on this, trajectory, and I'll take a break and come back. And then hopefully I can reach what I plan to.
Speaking of time tracking, you mentioned, do you recommend any tools for time management?
Yeah. So actually somebody just said it in the chat. It's one of my members. Toggle is what I use. TOGGL. That's the one I like. Is that what you use too?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually running right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
it's free.
This is how I'm spending my time today, recording the webinar. So it's part of my day. So
perfect.
It's running.
So Toggle is a great tool. And I haven't used it myself, but I know Rescue Time is something that has worked really well for a lot of
It is. My clients. I'm using it and it's great.
Okay. So a lot of people use that really well. And then the other tool is some sort of calendar software. So I use Google Calendar. But, another issue with people accepting more work than they really should, and now they're working until 2 a.m., is that if you are predicting how long a job is going to take you, so it's a 5-hour job and you're sure it's a 5-hour job, you can schedule that, block that time out on your calendar so that when a client contacts you and says, hey, can you take on, whatever new job, you should look at your calendar and go, okay, well, where's that job going to go then? Like, can it be pushed to tomorrow? so that you know, like straightforward, like, okay, if I accept this, I'm going to be working until 2 a.m. So it forces you to visually like move the job around somewhere so that you're not overworking yourself. You're not overwhelming yourself. And the same thing when you get like, we all have those bad days where you wake up and you just know like it's not going to be a productive day. Like you just know ahead of time. You're like, oh, we're not motivated, and it's like only 8 a.m. And on those days.
So sorry for interrupting. I just remember something. A funny thing happened to me yesterday. So I'm using a Windows laptop, and when I open my laptop, there's always a new picture with some scenery or something like that. So Windows automatically generates those pictures. And for some reason, they decided to show me a picture of a sloth. So 2 days in a row. So and I wasn't productive in the past couple of days, so I think they know something about me. So that was quite motivating, like a wake up call. when you open your laptop in the morning and you see a picture of a sloth, it's time to get
maybe programming you. So you see a big sloth. Oh, okay. So I just
work by. Yeah, exactly. But another thing I was going to say is that, on those days where you just know, like, it's just maybe like you wake up and your computer crashes, like very first thing, and then, you get your computer working and then like whatever, the toilet overflows and you're like, you know what, this day is just not happening. On those days, I think it's like really good too, to be like, maybe it's just time for me to take a personal day and move these jobs. Like, let me just see how I can move this around. So you're not like trudging. Or something, and then be productive the next day. So I think forcing yourself into productivity is not always the best option either, if it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, there is this thing in the word freelance, the first part, free, and you're always free to do whatever you want. If it's time for you to take a personal day off, go ahead, take it.
Exactly right.
And don't feel sorry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not feeling well, not sorry, but guilty. It's sometimes the most difficult thing for me personally.
Another reason why, like, it always helped me. I've always been one of those people that goes to work sick, right? Like, I have a job and I'm like trudging in there, like I have the flu, and they're like, seriously, you're just here infecting people, like go home. I've always been that kind of person. And when I work for myself, I would do the same thing. Like, I'm sick, I need to work anyway. But eventually I think that also helped me when I started using Google Calendar. It doesn't have to be Google, by the way. Of course, it can be anything. But just to know, like, the tasks are still going to get done. Like, the job is still going to get done. I'm just moving it here, And so it felt like it gave me permission, because I knew that it wasn't like it wasn't going to get done. It just was going to be done at a different time. So it felt like I was able to give myself permission to take time off and not feel bad about it.
Yeah. But then it's important not to move it.
So
you
mentioned you mentioned Google Calendar. Any other tools or pieces of software? Maybe something for better project management?
Yeah. So for project management, I actually use a tool called Pipedrive. So Pipedrive is actually it's a customer relationship management tool. So it's meant for salespeople, but I really like it because I'm a very visual person. And the way that it works is it has different stages. They call it the pipeline. And so you can move your project through the stage. So it's in translation right now, and now it's in, proofreading, and now it's delivered, and now it's invoiced, or something like that. So I use that. And then the other aspect, the other workflow system that I've used is just an Excel spreadsheet, but I have the status of the project on there and like a drop-down menu. So whatever system that you use, I think it's really, really important that you have a system, so that you're not just kind of reinventing the wheel. I talked to somebody that was writing everything down, like on a piece of, like, on Post-it notes. Like, that was her system for, like, when a project came in. I'm like, yeah, you might want to, like, that works if you only have like 3 projects working at a time and you're just remembering deadlines. But it's really, really important to be able to, have a system so that you could potentially, if you had to like hire somebody, you could explain it to somebody else. So it needs to be that clear that, it's clear and written down.
Well, sometimes post-it notes also can work. I mean, this is just a different kind of visual system.
For sure. But
As,
I mean,
as,
if you
lo- as,
have,
as long as you know how the system works and as long as
right,
it helps
like
you.
I said, having a system, so you're not just like, it's not a random post-it note where like you look at it and you're like, what did I mean here, kind of thing. So having a system is really, really important, whatever that system looks like. And I do think that, you know, even for post-it notes or something, if you end up in a situation like, you know, the more productive you are and things like that, if you're taking on more and more work, you know, if you have 25 working projects and you're on post-it note systems, I mean, I would be very impressed with that person if you're able to do all that efficiently. And, you know, I have had myself up to like 25 or more like working projects at a time. Projects, you know, longer projects that overlap and then like shorter projects in between. So that's not really an uncommon thing for me. So, you know, something like that would be really, really difficult for me to use.
Yeah. I'm actually using post-it
We
notes
actually have
for
a
another.
question from Ronnie. Are there any specific tools for time planning as opposed to time management?
Time planning. So I actually use I use my workflow system to do my time prescriptions as well. So I think what you mean is when I talk about like prescribing the time in advance, is that what you're saying? Like using a system for that? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I actually use my workflow spreadsheet for that purpose as well. So I have a column that says like, how long is this going to take me to do? And so it has the amount of money that I'm going to make, which is calculated by me entering the words, the total words I'm predicting for the project, if it's, you know, PDF or word count, and then the amount of money I'm going to make total. And then I do a 5 to 10 minute sections of the job. So for example, if the reason why I say sections is because if you have a job that like the first page is just, you know, paragraphs, and then page 2 or 3 is like a bunch of formatting and tables. If you just translated the paragraph, that's not a good indication of how long the job's going to take, because when you hit that formatting section, it's going to take much longer. So you do these representative sections, figure that out, and then I enter that, you know, once I calculate out the total amount that I'm estimating the project will take, I enter that into my spreadsheet, and it's going to tell me how much I'm going to make per hour, and it's going to tell me the total hours that that project is going to take. Then I go and I put that on my Google Calendar. So it's a, you know, it's a 2-hour project, 4-hour project, and I might space those hours out. Like maybe I know I'm not going to work. I typically don't translate more than 4 to 5 hours in a day. So the project would have to be split over multiple days. Just because, you know, if you're translating, for example, 1,000 words of medium or 2,000 words an hour, like, you know, just to be fair, translating 10,000 words every single day is not a sustainable, even if it's, you know, even if it's a 5-hour period of time, it's still a lot to process for your brain. Even if you're moving quickly, like it's still a lot taxing. So you have to take those breaks. So basically I include it in my workflow spreadsheet, and then I put it on my calendar. And that's how I like prescribe and force myself, like, now, okay, it's 9 a.m. It's time to start translating this project. Translate from 9 to 10, or, you know, 9 to 11, or whatever my plan is. And I make sure that I stay on target. If I go off target, then I have to change my calendar and move the hours around to add hours or whatever it is. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
it
it
seems
does.
like you really work a lot with your calendar.
Yeah, I do, because, you know, it's otherwise, like, to me, it just gets, there's so many moving parts that to keep all of that in my brain and also translate and also remember when things are due. And then also to weather, you know, when issues happen, like, you know, I have a client come back and say, hey, you did this half of the project. We had another translator the other half, but they totally messed it up. Can you fix it right now? And so if I have, you know, if I have everything just in my head, it might be hard for me to figure out whether or not I can help them, or I might say yes and then realize that I really can't because I had scheduled this project and it's actually due at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. So having a calendar allows me to just look very quickly, and I can immediately go, you know, yes, I can take it. No, I can't, without having to spend a lot of brain power or a lot of time and energy figuring out, you know, as translators, we want to spend as much of our time and energy translating, not like working with all this stuff. So the more systems we can create to manage workflow, to manage emergencies, to manage prioritization, the more our time and energy we can spend on quality translation.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I personally use a tool called Translation Office 3000. I think
Yeah,
it's
I've heard of
developed by Ukrainian or Russian
it.
developers, and I've been using it for years, and it really works out really well for me because it's, first of all, you can easily and quickly set up your projects, you can set up your deadlines, and they have a basic visualization where you can see on the timeline when all your projects on a single timeline, and you can see which project is due when, and it's easier for you to navigate between projects. And when you receive a new request for quotes or potential project from a returning customer, you can easily feed it into your schedule and make sure that you actually promise a reasonable deadline.
Yeah, that's always
Yeah.
the key, right?
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
has an invoicing feature too, right?
yep, yeah. It's also, you can also create invoices. I think you can also send them, but I prefer to send them manually in the PDFs. Yeah, so this is just another suggestion
Yeah.
for anyone who's looking for a tool, this is what I personally use. When you're a translator, it's always about the number of words you can produce because, well, it's the easiest way to measure your productivity, how many words you produce per hour. So, and what do you think? How many words a productive translator can translate per hour? And is there a way to increase this amount?
Sure. So for a lot of translators that I know that add additional tools, so I'll just give the rates for the complexity that I mentioned earlier. So if you are, once you're using a timer for your jobs, you should be able to figure out the low, medium, and complexity and high complexity jobs. Usually when people first start using a timer, every single job seems completely different from every other job. And then eventually, you start noticing patterns and like, okay, these types of jobs take this long and so on. And you can be more accurate in your predictions. But so for the highest complexity of documents that I would accept, my words per hour would be around 700. And then for medium, it would be around 1,000. And then for low complexity documents, it would be 2,000, sometimes 2,500 words per hour. So I think if you're using tools effectively, that's a very reasonable number to hit. But like I said earlier, one thing that I do want people to keep in mind is that, yes, that means that if you're like, for example, if you're translating 2,000 words per hour, yes, that means you can make more money in a given day, right? Because you can get through more words. But it's important to remember that you're still translating, 6,000 words or whatever it is. So, I wouldn't schedule days of 10,000 word days, back to back to back to back to back to back, because you're going to get really exhausted just mentally. I use Dragon, for example. So that's one tool that I've been able to leverage quite well. So I try to explain it for anybody that does translation and interpretation. It's like being in a simultaneous booth for that long, for however long you're translating. So it's like you can't do that for 9 hours and then do it again for another 9 hours and again for another 9 hours, right? There's a reason why people switch off, right? You're by yourself, so you're just gonna have to stop and then start again. But so Dragon is one of the tools that I use, and I use it a lot for productivity and not just for dictation. So it will do a lot of different automations of my computer for me. Inside of Cat Tools, I have it do a lot of different types of automation. So that's one of the tools that I absolutely love. And I think that everyone that can, who, the language it supports, which unfortunately I think it doesn't support Russian.
Yeah,
but
last time I checked.
Yeah. However, I have heard from a lot of people that the Windows dictation is getting quite good. So.
Yeah, the thing about dictation tools, it all depends on what kind of work do you do. For example, in my line of work, in video game localization, we often have so-called tags, and sometimes there is pieces of code in place. So even if you dictate, you still have to copy paste a lot of stuff, and it kind of, you have to switch between different modes of work, from dictation to manual copy paste and tag placement, and making sure that the sentence is correct and the tags are placed correct. Because if you place a tagging correctly is can break the game basically.
For sure.
As opposed to making a simple spelling mistake or being a little bit slower. So this is one of the difficulties that I'm having with adopting dictation tools at the moment. But I'm glad that it is working out for you. And you mentioned that you can translate up to 2,000 words per hour. I think it's very impressive. Yeah. Because I was thinking about my own productivity and how many words I translate, and I guess it all depends on the subject field. But in video game localization, where it tends to be more creative and like you have to develop your writing skill, and you have to spend a lot of time and focusing on adapting the language and making sure that you're not just translate, but you localize. And it takes much more time than that to translate 1,000 words, unfortunately. But it's still a great field to work in.
Right, definitely. It sounds like it. I will say this about the dictation. There are actually a lot of people who do full entire software coders who use dictation software. So they're actually coding things like video games with dictation from the beginning. So it is something that's a possibility. And Dragon also has the ability to assign keywords to certain things that repeat themselves. So if you had strings of code that were going to repeat with different types of tags, you can actually assign word commands to those tags. So I don't know that Windows is as good as Dragon when it comes to accuracy. I have heard that Dragon is still the leader for software coders. So, because unfortunately with coding, there's no context, right? So it's harder for it to predict. And so Dragon apparently is better in terms of being accurate where the context is really lacking. Because dictation relies a lot on context to figure out the difference between, TO and TOO, for example. But with coding, there's less context. But Dragon apparently is able to, I don't code, so I wouldn't know, but I know a bunch of people that code with it. So,
I think we should invite folks from Dragon to do one of those webinars. What do you think?
That's a great idea. Yeah, good idea.
So how can an experienced translator create more time in their day?
Right. So my number one suggestion to everybody is to use a timer. I think that a lot of people are surprised at the amount of time they're spending doing other things. So one of the things that I suggest, and I'm actually giving a webinar tomorrow where I'll be going through this in more detail, but basically you want to use two different timers. One is your project timer, which we'd already talked about, Toggle, and that's the one that I use for that purpose. And then the other timer is a clock in and clock out timer. So there'd be two separate timers running at the same time. And the clock in, clock out timer would essentially be, if you're checking Facebook, you don't need to clock out, because if you were sitting in an office job, you wouldn't need to clock out to check your Facebook or your personal email or something. If you go to the bathroom, you don't need to clock out. But imagine you go walk your dog, or you go to the grocery store in the middle of the day. I mean, these are all things that an employer would say, hey, I'm not going to pay you to go to the grocery store. So you would clock out for that. So if you run these two timers, the idea is to get the number of hours you're translating. In other words, the number of hours you're actually generating income to be as close as possible to the time that you're quote unquote clocked in. So you might find that there's a huge disparity between the two. That's what I found when I very first started running the two timers, is that I was working a 14-hour day and I had translated for 4 hours because I was taking so many breaks. I just didn't realize what was happening. And I was like, oh, let me just run to the grocery really quick. Oh, I need to do the laundry. Oh, I need to clean this. I need to run the dishwasher. So I was just doing all these things really quick. And I thought that I figured it was maybe 2 hours, 2 hours of personal time that I had taken, not triple or something, not like that. But it's amazing how quickly it adds up. Yeah. And not just personal things, but also, business related things. So for example, if you're overwhelmed with work and, you're not great with numbers or bookkeeping, maybe you're spending a ridiculous amount of time on keeping track of invoicing and whether or not people have paid you and all of that. Maybe that's a huge time suck for you. So if you're really experienced and you're overwhelmed with work and you're like turning down work or working really late. So maybe it's time for you to hire a bookkeeper, right, to help you keep track of that. That way you can spend your time making money from translation versus, you know, free time hours on bookkeeping. I mean, that's one of the things that happened to me was I realized I was spending a ridiculous number of hours on bookkeeping because I just wasn't good at that. And when I hired a bookkeeper, I thought, oh my God, it's going to cost me like $1 million. I'm not going to be able to afford it. And she does like 2 hours a month is like how much. And it's like, when I look at like, you know, but that's what it is to hire a professional, right? Like translator, is not a professional translator. Like if you're not a professional translator, you're going to, every single phrase, you're going to be like, huh, I never thought about how to say that in this language. You know, that's going to happen all the time. You hire a professional, like they have systems and processes and they're much more efficient at it than you are because that's not your, you know, that's not what you do. You're a translator, not a bookkeeper, not an accountant, not a whatever. So it was, I hired her and I was like, man, I really wish I had known about this so long ago. I could have made so much more money or like saved myself so much more headache. Like I hate it anyway. So
yeah, it's
really important to
it's always pays off. Yeah,
you can't.
So it's always pays off to hire a professional where there is a way to hire a professional. I mean, you don't always have to do everything yourself. And as you mentioned, it's not always that expensive when you start trying.
When you adapt.
I also have an accountant, but I do most of my accounting, and she helps me with taxes because who loves taxes? No, nobody does. So
I make it complicated on purpose.
Yeah. Even when they, for example, in Canada, where they have a program here, then they try to help you. Like 3 weeks ago, I had actually people from Canada Revenue Agency visiting me to do a free seminar. To go over my taxes, and they showed me how to use the website. But still, it's quite complicated. And when you work in translation and focusing on something entirely different, working with numbers, it's difficult. It takes a lot of your time, and sometimes it just pays off to hire a professional and spend, you know, couple $100, but know that it's going to be done professionally and in the most efficient way possible. Plus, you freeing up some time to do more important work, like working on a project or following up with clients and answering client emails.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we underestimate ourselves, right? We underestimate how many hats we have to wear, or we do wear, even in a given day. Like we don't even give ourselves enough credit, I think, to all the different things we do. I mean, for most businesses, that's why there are full-time positions for all of these different things. That's why they have full-time salespeople. You know, that's why they have full-time bookkeepers. That's why they have an accounting department, right? Because it takes a lot to run all of that. So even though it's a much smaller scale, it's a lot of work. And to try to be a professional at all these different things is just ridiculous, right? Like it's just not realistic. So you know, I think that if people are overwhelmed with work, it's time to start looking at what are your options for getting some of these things off your plate.
Yeah, earlier in this webinar, you mentioned that a lot of translators, they go through the so-called feast and famine, and quite often, and I noticed it personally, when you end with the feast, you feel exhausted. You like a squeezed lemon, and it's not good. It's not a good sign. And can you give any tips or any advice how not to feel exhausted at the end of the feast season, and how to find more energy to go through the famine season? So you could work on invoices, following up with clients, chasing new leads, etc.
Well, I think the first thing is to plan ahead. Like, you know that this is going to be the situation. So, one of the things that I always tell people is that we can always, we need to be marketing ourselves, right? So, and even if you have these feast periods where, let's imagine, I know a lot of people are working maybe 15-hour days and they're still turning down work. And so they're like, well, why would I market myself if I'm going through these periods where I'm turning down work and working really the maximum number of hours that a human can work, you know? Well, because you should not be working 15 hours. You know, it's better to try to work 8 hours or, you know, whatever you work comfortably and sustainably. And then if you're marketing yourself, then even when the famine hits, you'll still have a few hours at least of work to do every single day. So maybe you're still spending more time taking care of invoicing or taking care of, you know, more marketing or whatever it is that you want to do. But the famine shouldn't be completely empty. And if it is, then to me, that's an indication that you do need to be spending more time on, you know, marketing and things like that. So yes, you're going to have, you know, peaks and valleys, but it shouldn't go to zero. It should go to something that's still sustaining your income and still allowing you to work productively. But, you know, during the feast period, basically, it should feel like almost a full-time job to turn down work. You know, like it should almost be like, man, I wish I had an assistant that could just write emails that say that I'm booked, right? Or something like that. And then during the famine periods, you know, you should still have some work coming in, or, you know, feel like it's okay to take a day off. You know, and obviously we want to try to schedule our vacations during these quote unquote famine periods so that we can take more advantage of the feast periods. The other thing that I would suggest is a lot of people feel that they need to, especially, so if you're working for agencies, for example, it's a little bit different, direct clients versus agencies in this type of realm, in my opinion. But if you're working for agencies, I mean, that's the model, right? Like they have multiple translation vendors. So there's no reason why you need to feel like if somebody contacted you first, you have to take that job versus the next job, the next job, the next job. So, I mean, look at which jobs are more productive for you. You know, are you translating this type of video game? If you're doing video games, are you translating this type of material more quickly than that type of material? And if so, then you would want to prioritize the ones where you're making more per hour over the ones where you're making less per hour, because you can do that. You have to turn somebody down, right? If you're working for direct clients, of course, it gets more complicated because, especially if you're their only vendor, for example.
That's one of the problems when working with direct client, because you're the only vendor and you feel like you're obligated to help them, even if you're not available right now. You still need to help them because they're clueless and they cannot find another translator without your help. So you still need to dedicate your time to at least refer them to somebody.
Right. So that's exactly what I was going to say. But if you're in that kind of situation, I mean, what if you get like, you know, God forbid, what if you break your leg and you're like in the hospital or incapacitated? These things happen. You should have a plan B anyway. Like you should have a colleague you can refer them to. You should outsource the project to your colleague, whatever you want to do. But, you know, that's a really not good situation if like you're the only one in the whole entire world that can help them with this thing. I mean, what if they have that thing at like 3 o'clock in the morning? Are you going to like get out of bed now and like go, you know, like you have to have a plan B no matter what your situation. With agencies, it should be a little bit easier because that's the model. I mean, they've got, you know, multiple vendors and they should have multiple vendors. And if not, then, you know, you should have colleagues that you can refer work. And the idea is just be the solution, right? Whatever that solution is, whether you're referring to somebody else or you're outsourcing it or you're helping the client, however, but it doesn't necessarily have to be you translating 18 hours a day, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope.
A question from Ronnie. Are there specific feast and famine months in the translation industry, or does it all depend?
I don't know. You guys.
I think it all depends.
I think it depends.
I think it
yeah,
because, like,
I agree.
I mean, you know, there's this whole big controversy about like what industry we're in, right? Are we in the translation industry or are we in the video game industry, in the medical industry, and, you know, whatever. And I think that it's like almost a combination. But I know that when pharmaceutical companies get their budgets approved and then trials are like clinical trials are starting or whatever, all of a sudden I see a spike in work. Does that always coincide with, you know, it being August or it being like a busy or not busy month in the quote unquote translation industry? I think it just depends on how busy your like sector is in that time. And especially for those of us who might do more than one specialization, like if you might do medical and also something else, like maybe, you know, medical industry is like really, you know, bopping at some time. And then this other industry is like busy at a different time. It just seems like it really depends to me.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think there are no specific months that are common for most of us. There might be specific months for those of us who work in the same industry, like you said, and work for the same type of a client. And and but I don't think that there are specific months that are true for every translator. Like say every January we all have a feast, and every February we all have a famine. I don't think that this is something that is common in our line of work.
Yeah, I think like I used to think that around the holidays was, you know, a little bit slower because people like didn't want to start new projects or whatever. But I mean, a couple of years ago, I had one of the busiest Decembers that I ever had. It was my biggest month of the entire year, and I was like, I give up. I don't know why. I'm gonna stop trying to like.
Yeah, I mean, same thing here. I mean, I've been tracking my projects over the course of the past like 5-6 years, and I can look past at the like see to see the patterns, and I don't see any patterns because last January was slow, this January was crazy, and the January before this was slow, and then it was crazy. So it's never the same, and every year is different, and it all depends on how much work you take, how good you are at marketing and getting new clients. And it's quite obvious for me that if you get more work, if you get more clients, if you establish your brand and your business, soon enough you'll probably never have this feast or famine, and everything's going to just level up and be on kind of the same level if you manage it correctly.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, to like, you know, you should be at the point where when you have this famine, like that you don't like panic. Because even if every single year April is like your busiest month, for example, and then this year April's not busy, I mean, you shouldn't like be like, that's it, I'm never going to work again. I'm just
yeah, I quit.
Realize that we're running businesses, and sometimes there are busy times and sometimes there are not busy times, and that's okay. But that's one of the reasons why it's important to have that list of things that you need to accomplish when you have more time, so that you don't, because I talk to a lot of translators that get into like a depression when that happens, like a full on, like, I'm not a good translator and that's why I'm not working, and that And it's like, and then of course a month later they're swamped with work and they didn't do anything for a month because they were too busy being depressed, you know. So it's important to like keep yourself motivated and have this like list of things that you're going to do. Like, okay, I don't have any work at all today. I haven't, like crickets in my email box. So today I'm going to start on this list and, you know, just knock things out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to joke around. If it's a famine season, you can always start planning a vacation or send a blast email to your clients that starting tomorrow you're going on vacation, and you'll drown in work in the next few seconds.
Yeah, I think that any translator who's been around for like even longer than like 10 minutes will tell you like, just wait for it. It's like.
And I also think
so how much time do you spend on other tasks like invoicing and follow-up with clients and communication apart from translation?
So now it's a little bit different because of the coaching. So it's a whole different, you know, webinars and all that. So I'm just going to talk about, you know, my productive moment, like before I started adding coaching on, because it's a different aspect. So probably about an hour a week when it came to like promoting and like that type of thing. And it would just depend on what my translation. So that would be my sustainable. I'm working full time. I have a full docket of translation, and then maybe like a couple hours a week or so. Of course, I outsource my invoicing, so I'm not doing that. And I outsource a lot of personal tasks as well, so that I'm not trying to, you know, do this or that really quickly, do laundry. So I outsource things like laundry. I drop off my laundry. Might seem ridiculous because I have the option to work from home, but I try really hard to, like, when I'm at work, I'm at work, I'm working. And then, you know, I do the promotion and stuff on the side, very little though, but I make sure that it's regular. So I just make sure that, you know, I'm spending time checking. And then, you know, in terms of emailing and that type of thing, I would say maybe less than an hour a day. And I use a lot of templates. So I use a lot of template emails that I just copy and paste so that I can go through like project requests and things like that really, really fast.
Yeah, I think templates are one of the best way to speed up your time, and just makes it easier to quickly reply to most common emails. And yeah.
Yeah, and just a plug again for Dictation software, you can load email templates into the Dictation software. So you could say something like "play booked," and it goes, thank you for contacting me. I'm currently fully booked through blah, and it writes this whole entire email. So it's like right in the middle of something, you know, I could take a break, look at my email and be like, click, play booked, send, click, play booked, send, click, play booked. You know, so it's just like, I don't even have to like copy the email and paste it. It just like does it.
Yeah,
right.
It's a pity that Dragon doesn't support Russian.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know. I wish I need more feedback about like the Windows dictation. I have heard from people that they are using it for translation and for navigating around that type of thing. And I know that the Windows and Mac, their internal dictation supports a lot more languages than Dragon does. But I do know that, like I said, I know that software coders, for example, have tried to use Windows and Mac, and they're not being nearly as successful as they are with Dragon. So that leads me to believe that the recognition might be a little bit, you know, still lacking.
I tried Mac dictation and it wasn't really good. It was I think probably a couple of years ago, okay. But probably there were some improvements. But
yeah, I mean, hopefully it's improving, but yeah.
It's sure. I'm sure it's improving. The question is how quickly it's improving.
So. Right, or how much? Like, you know, at what point are you spending more time correcting what it did wrong than you are actually saving by, you know? So it has to be an actual time saving. Because if you're going back and correcting every other word, then, you know, probably not worth it.
Yeah. What's the top piece of advice that you would give to a translator who's currently struggling with time management?
Probably using a timer is like the number one thing that I would suggest that everyone use if you have any issues with time management, and being as specific as possible with that timer. So, and I think that, you know, I hear from people where they're like, well, it's kind of annoying and it takes time to start and stop the timer every time I switch tasks. Like if I'm switching from translating to emailing, normally when I'm translating, I hear my email box ding and I go look at it. And I'm like, well, you know what? That's your problem right there, that you're switching so many times that it's bothering you to switch the timer, right? Because if you were only checking your email once an hour, once every few hours, you wouldn't be so annoyed that you were stopping and starting the timer. So it really gets you to think, you know, about your time and what you're doing and how you're using it. Whereas it's just so easy for us to just let it get away from ourselves and just, you know, let me do this, let me do that, let me check this email. And, you know, now the day is half over and we haven't translated a single word or, you know, whatever. So I think using a timer is probably the number one thing that I would tell people to do like right now, and keep track of that and be aware of it. I also have been told by a lot of people that it works a lot like being on a diet, where like the second you start writing your food down, now all of a sudden you're like the healthiest person ever because you have to write it down, and nobody wants to write down like ate a whole pizza, right? Like, whereas if you're just you're just like one more, you know, ate a whole bag of chips. Like you're like, oh, I have to write this down. So you know, I think it works a lot with the same thing with the timer. It's like, you know, nobody wants to write like spent 4 hours watching cat videos on Facebook. So it doesn't happen, you know? So using a timer is probably my number one.
Yeah. I think it's a great tip. And I personally love using a timer, and it really helps to figure out where does your time go? What are your most common mistakes, for example, like you mentioned, like switching between the tabs, answering emails. So, and it just by doing this for a couple of months, you can easily find the ways to improve your time management and to see what can be done, what can be resolved, what bad habits you might have. And it's important to track everything, like you said, like with the pizza, like every single topping that you have on it should be tracked. And
don't act like it's a cheese pizza if you've got 10 toppings on there.
Yeah.
all the calories should be accounted for.
Exactly.
I think there are two main things that are working really great for me, apart from using timer, which is also great. It's the first one is doing the most important thing the first thing in the morning, and in the majority of cases is translation. And this is it makes really a huge difference when I'm doing it the first thing in the morning. First, you mentioned it during our talk, Jenae, that if I'm done with the translation, with my most important task for the day, it really feels good, and it's just and it really makes me feel more productive when I'm doing it the first thing in the morning. So I might also do some other useful things after that as well. And another thing is switching my phone into flight mode and switching off my email program for this 45-minute period. It really works great because no one can reach me. And the thing is that it happens really rare. It's really rare that something is so urgent that it can't wait for the next 45 minutes. And during my 15-minute break, I can just check my email, check my phone, check my messages. I try not to check my social media feeds during the day, but yeah, I can do that if I need to. And it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's another great tip. I mean, one of the things that I suggest everyone does, and I know that people will start having heart palpitations when I say this, but I turn off 100% of my notifications 100% of the time. So at no point does my phone ever ding,
even
sound,
email,
ring, nothing ever. And the reason is because if you need, like you said, you know what, the job that I do, even medical translation, I promise you that no one is going to lose their life because I didn't check that text message or email or whatever it is. No one will die. And so, I might miss a project here and there, but the fact that I'm so much more productive and because I'm turning down work anyway, that's not that big of a deal. And so if you can boost your work to that point, it's not so terrible. So I turn off all of my notifications. And then when I want to actually go and look at my email, I do that.
You mean you're turning them off while you're working, right?
They're actually off all the time.
Oh, I think that's the next level for me because I can't turn everything off all the time.
The most advanced level.
Yeah, here's why. Because to me, a notification is someone else deciding when you should do what with your time, right? It's like saying it's calling your attention from the thing that you're doing over to the thing that they're notifying you about. Versus you deciding, let me go check my inbox and see how many, see what emails I have right now. As soon as you pay attention to that notification, it's someone else deciding what you're doing with your time. And so to me, at no point do I need someone else to decide what I do with my time. And it's not that I check my phone once a day or something. I mean, I still check my phone during these breaks, but I need to focus clearly. And I don't need to be like, I wonder what that email is about. Do you think it's a project? Maybe it's a question. What, I don't need that while I'm trying to be productive. And even if I'm just trying to relax, if I'm trying to relax, when I talked about batching tasks, I meant that in the most extreme way possible. If I'm relaxing and watching a TV show, then I'm relaxing and watching a TV show. That's what I'm doing right now. If I want to check my phone, then I'm going to check my phone and take care of whatever I need to take care of and then go on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's really something to think about because multitasking is something that I think the majority of people does. I know I do. Especially I can somehow limit it while I'm working, but I haven't actually thought about limiting it while I'm having fun or relaxing, because in those cases my notifications on social media are turned off for all social media and forever, and I'm just super happy about it, and I'm not going to turn them on ever, because I think for me it's obvious that there's nothing that can be posted there, or no one that can message me there. I just don't need it. It can't be that important that it can't wait. I don't know, for the evening when I check that. But for other notifications like email, I actually have them turned on, and now I'm probably going to consider turning.
Try it for a day. Try it for one day and just see how it goes, and schedule time in your calendar. Okay, at this time I'm going to check my email, whatever, and just see how it goes. And I think you'll find that you're training your clients and you're training people to not expect you to reply within 10 minutes. And it's really, and nothing happens. Your business is not going to implode, nothing. You're oh, I don't know why I was so stressed about that.
Yeah.
It's a really freeing feeling to not be tied to all these things.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add? Because I think I could talk about it for another hour, I think, because time management is really a fascinating topic, but it's
something I'm
so
really
much ironic,
about,
yeah.
So, yeah. So I will say, if you don't care, that I like I said, I am doing a webinar where I'm going to go into a lot of stuff.
You can post the link
tomorrow.
If you have the link, you can post it in the chat box so that people could see it, and we'll also include it in the show notes, of course, so that everyone has the opportunity to participate. Well, thank you for joining us for this interview, Jenae. It's been really great talking to you. I've learned a ton of useful things and have a couple of experiments to conduct. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight and everyone who listened to this recording and watched this recording on YouTube. Don't forget to share it with your colleagues and friends, because I think time management is actually a universal topic, because so you can share it with other friends who are not necessarily translators. Don't forget to check out our website if you're watching this in the recording, translatorsOnAir.com, and you can subscribe to our mailing list so that you can join us for the next interviews. Also, please don't forget to check out the website of our sponsors at smartcat.ai, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Jenae.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.